Do or behind the blue curtain. Let's make sure that the stream is working. Oh, say something.
Me saying something.
All right, we're good. Like the thing I always forget to do is check to make sure that the audio is working. But we should be good. We're coming out from behind the blue curtain. Hello, welcome to Derps Talk About Games. I'm your co-host Mango,
And I am your co-host, Buddy.
and today we're going to talk a little bit about puzzle design in games. Before we do that, buddy, why don't you tell the folks at home what it is we do on this podcast?
Well, on this podcast, we like to talk about games, and this one is gonna be like a real, real deep dive into crunchy mechanics, right? Like, it feels like I don't know. I don't want to say a return to form because that sort of implies that we've been off form, but just like back to basics. The basics
to our
of some
roots.
talk about. Yeah, return to our roots is a good way. Way to phrase it. Yeah. So puzzles in games. How do they work? What's the way that they function? Let's talk about it a little, I guess.
Yeah, especially in the context of kind of the modern era. Buddy, when you were pitching this idea to me, I think you had like a kind of good setup. So what you want to go through that again?
Yeah, sure. Okay. So the other day, I'm hanging out in Discord with a bunch of friends. We're talking, we're watching YouTube videos together, and then somebody mentions that they have an emulator, right? And so then we're looking at emulated games, and we're like, oh, you should play this, you should play that. And one of the games that we asked them to play, we were like, you should go play Pokemon Snap. So they load up Pokemon Snap. And you start Pokemon Snap in the very beginning, right? You don't have any of your pester balls, you don't have your the Pokemon food that looks like an apple, to do anything kind of along those lines. You just take your pictures, right? But as we were sort of going, we were remembering some of those little pieces and secrets to the original Pokemon Snap. Things like knocking Charmander in the volcano level into the little pool of lava, boom, out pops a Charizard, right? Things like throwing an apple at an electrode and getting it to explode in order to capture a picture. I would describe these as puzzles in a way because like you know that a thing is going to happen. You just have to sort of like learn it. And there's a lot of little secrets to Pokemon Snap that come from this process, right? From encouraging, using the Poke Flute to get Pikachu to dance, baiting Pikachu over to the surfboard, right? Lots of stuff like that. There's a million sort of things along these sorts of lines. I was also doing it in another N64 game that I was playing. This one is Yoshi's Story. So Yoshi's Story is a platformer. You're playing Yoshi. Yoshi can eat guys or do whatever. But there's a lot of little secrets to how Yoshi's Story works where, like there are puzzles to solve. There are areas of the map to explore that will give you, they will unlock levels. They will unlock further levels that you can play on. They will unlock special Yoshis, right? Like there's a white Yoshi and a black Yoshi that you can pick up by finding their special eggs in your levels. And those things are also sort of like little mini puzzles, right? And the way that you know about them is in the era that they were from, right? The late 90s, was word of mouth, right? It was, we rented Yoshi's Story at the Blockbuster. I'm playing it, and the next day at soccer practice, I'm telling my friends I'm playing Yoshi's Story, and somebody goes, hey, you should look at the bottom of the tower in level 3-2. There's a cool egg there that gives you a special Yoshi, right? That kind of a thing, right? Now, all of that is offloaded onto the internet, right? If you want to do any of that stuff, you can do it on the internet. And by the way, I'm sure at the time people were doing this on the internet. I know that 1997 was still like the internet days, but like to a 7-year-old, none of us were using the internet along those sorts of lines. And I do think that there's a marked difference in the way that puzzles are approached right now in modern video games compared to the way that they are approached, they were approached back then. And it sort of keys into some of the stuff that we've been talking about recently. So I don't know, that was sort of my pitch. That's sort of my lead in for where we're headed.
Yeah, no, I think that's a super interesting topic, especially because like not Yoshi Story. Pokemon Snap is a particularly weird one because it's kind of like it's basically like a like one of those slow moving theme park rides that like has interactable bits in it, right? And it's not like they are puzzles, but they're not like puzzles in the classic sense where like you like you're not always aware that there are things you can do, right? And that's the
Yeah.
nature of a lot of video game stuff, right? It's like, you know, there's not there are secrets, but like it's not like, there's a thing that like there was, especially in that era, there's things like 4 secrets here, right? Find all 4 secrets or whatever, right? But there's a secret in this room, right? It's a bunch of kind of like happenstance or know-how, right? Um, Interesting part of this too is that word of mouth thing you're talking about, right? Also, like, had a lot of false stuff in it, right? Like this is like the
Yep.
classic, like how to get Mew in uh Pokemon, right? Like the short answer is you can't. Um, Despite like hundreds of rumors, right? And other stuff too. Like the other big thing I can remember about this is like stuff like basically one friend had the like Prima guide, and that had all the information in it, and so that's how they knew about it or whatever. And I think to your point, like the internet was definitely around, but I don't think it was like it wasn't as like access wasn't as widespread in '97 and
Yeah.
whatnot. And
Yeah, I like, I don't know when you got really onto the internet, but it took me a while to really like get access to the internet in a real way, especially because like smartphones weren't a thing.
yeah,
The family computer, right, was
yeah,
a really common occurrence in sort of that era, and learning to do some of these things was about like kind of growing up with one centralized computer rather than everybody sort of having a personalized computer at all times.
yeah. No, that was definitely a thing, right? Like early enough on, right? It was like you can't use the internet and talk on the phone at the same time. So like any
Hmm.
extended internet kind of session was out of the question because also no one had cell phones, and it was it was the landline or the internet, and that's what you got,
Yep.
right? Um, and like you said, right? Like because it's the family computer, right? Like I know that the amount of stuff I could do on the computer was severely limited by like the games I could play. Like, was limited by the fact that sometimes my mom needed to use the computer for like adult stuff, right? Like,
Yep.
um,
Yeah, and like, even when we did have access to the internet, I had like no idea. Like, I don't know that you would have been able to. I don't know that I would have been able to like do a real search for anything, right? Like, these were the days before it felt like Google was around,
yeah, no,
right?
I mean
I'm sure Google was around, obviously.
Google came into existence when we were in like middle school. It was like 90.
Was it really?
Not well, I should know this. Did you employ me? Um,
True. When did the Google search engine first debut? 1998. Yeah.
okay.
Wow. Google didn't exist till
Really
98.
good.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you,
And,
Charles.
and even after 1998, I don't know that I learned about Google in a real way until like maybe somewhere in the 2001,
Yeah,
like middle school, right? Yeah, like
and
a
and,
couple of years after.
and for a while that was still kind of like doable, but like like you were still competition for like Ask Jeeves or like AOL keyword
Yes.
search, right? Like,
Yes, AOL keyword searches. Those were commercials, right? Like
yeah,
AOL keyword, whatever.
yeah,
Weird, God, weird to think about. Anyway, so just on the topic of like Pokemon Snap is a weird example of this. It's funny because I think of Pokemon Snap as a rail shooter, right? That's sort of what it
yeah,
is, right?
yeah. That's fair.
You are on rails and you are shooting, but you're just shooting your camera, and it's sort of like an accuracy in a way, kind of like simulator. Like, are you getting good shots? When you are effectively shooting your gun, even though it is again a camera. But the thing is the puzzle solving nature of it is built into the game. You need
Right.
to figure out ways to get better shots in order to progress. Like, the progression is intrinsically tied to the photos you're taking, getting good points. And you need to get certain numbers of Pokemon like different Pokemon, where it's like, oh well, are you going to get a Butterfree? Are you going to get a Pidgey? Are you going to get a whatever? In order to progress. And I think that's kind of like the puzzle solving nature of it. And one of the interesting things about Pokemon Snap, by the way, is that I think a lot of the puzzle solving in that game is not intrinsic to that game. Which is to say, if I were to give my dad Pokemon Snap, I don't think he could complete that game, because he doesn't
Yeah.
know that a Charmander evolves into Charizard, right? He doesn't have sort of the contextual knowledge of having played Pokemon Red or Blue, and you understand the ways in which certain aspects of the game work that they do, because you have the knowledge of what a Pokemon is, how it evolves, etc. That Pokemon Snap does in fact rely on. But that's sort of a little bit beside the point.
Yeah, I think a big part of this too is like even if you have that context, it's not like a lot of the puzzles in Pokemon Snap are things that you necessarily like will immediately recognize, right? Like knocking the Charmander or Charmeleon into the fire or whatever to get a Charizard. There's like not anything in like the Pokemon lore that makes you think that like that should be a thing that works, right? Like that's like maybe a thing you get from context of this thing is walking around a fire pit. Maybe I can bonk him into the fire pit, right?
Yeah.
I think that's actually kind of key to kind of like the broader discussion about like modern puzzle solving, right? You were mentioning in the pre-show about how like something happens in WoW, right? Like there's a puzzle in WoW, like for instance, the Great Shellcon was a thing I did yesterday, right? Which is a boss in Theldraszus. You can't fight him directly, and there's an NPC that gives you kind of a clue. But I'm like, I can't be bothered to figure out what this shit is. Go to WoWhead, figure out like how to get there, right? I think there's a couple of things happening there. One, I think this is why and this is a way in which it's like Pokemon Snap, is that if the puzzle feels kind of like obtuse or a thing you can't reasonably guess, I think it feels less like a cheat to go look it up, right? Like, because the other thing I'm keeping in my head is the modern game Baba Is You, which is a game about, which is a puzzle game. The whole game is puzzles. One, you go look up the answers, you kind of defeat the point. Two, everything you need to solve the puzzle is kind of explicitly in front of you. You just have to think about how to arrange it, right? Like where like what the bait to get the Great Shellcon is like not obvious, and like maybe you've seen it in your travels somewhere, but like and obviously someone does, and that's how like the community solves the puzzle. But it's not like that's it's not like there's enough context there for you to really figure out like how to solve that puzzle, right? It's just
Yeah, and I would argue that that's actually in its own way. It's sort of fine, right? Because I do actually think that group problem solving is legitimate, and it's a real way that people interface with the game. So, for instance, there's another treasure in Dragonflight called the Hornswogg Hoard or whatever. There's this giant frog that is in front of a cave. There is a notebook near that frog, and the notebook has really esoteric clues, right? And you eventually figure out, like I did this by doing exactly what you did. I went to Wowhead. I found, there are three items around the whole map, right? Not even nearby, just like throughout the whole zone that this treasure is in. You click on those items, you bring them back to the book, you combine the items, you give it to the guy, and the Hornswogg moves. You can go access the treasure kind of behind him, right? I don't think that's a good puzzle in a personal sense, right? In the way that a Baba Is You puzzle would be a good puzzle, right? But I do think that that's a good puzzle in a group sense, right? In the sense of a group of people in the WoW secret finding Discord, which is a real community that exists, right? They get together and they go, "Oh, okay, so they're talking about these three items. We have to find them." And somebody goes, "Oh, you know what? I remember coming across this, whatever it is, a bronze sword out in the world, and I could click on it, but I didn't know what it did, right?" And it's like, oh well, the diary mentions a bronze sword, which is like, oh okay. And then as these people are sort of crowdsourcing the solution to the puzzle, right? They can then go put it up on Wowhead. I think that's valid, right? And I don't want to like. There's a part of me that wants to attack that sort of thing, but I don't want to do that because I think that that's lame and uncool. And I think that there's a lot of puzzle design in modern World of Warcraft as well as other titles, right?
Like Destiny's I think a big part of this.
Yeah, exactly. Destiny is a big part of this. I'm also thinking of like the FNAF community, the Five Nights at Freddy's community is a lot like this, right? Where they are looking for these sorts of secrets and Easter eggs in order to. I mean, the Five Nights at Freddy's sort of ecosystem really revolves around this sort of thing, right? This group lore as puzzle problem solving where you are finding these items and then you're plugging them into a thing later down the line in order to make whatever you want happen, right? And I think that that's neat, and I think that that's interesting. But it is just very different to what we have with Pokemon Snap. So yeah, I don't know. Where do we take it from there?
Yeah, so I think another part of this too is kind of like what the point of the game is, right? Like with Pokemon Snap, it's kind of like if you went and just looked up how to solve all the puzzles in Pokemon Snap, you're kind of defeating the point of Pokemon Snap, right? Like, whereas it's something like WoW, there's like 1,000 different ways to play WoW, but like, if you just want to get like the horns, like solving weird environmental puzzles is not near the top of that list in any way, shape, or form, right? Like, so it doesn't feel as bad to go like solve those puzzles. Like, for instance, I occasionally do Wordle, right? Like the now New York Times own word puzzle. And there are times when I like just can't think of a word that fits the clues I have, and so there's like there is a helper that will like fit you back a list of words that fit like the things you feed into it. So it's not quite like I went and looked up the answer because it's the same for everybody on the day, right? But it is kind of like I feel dirty when I do it, right? I feel like I try and persevere to the point where where I'm uh where like I think of a word and go for it rather than immediately feeding it into the thing, because at that point it's just kind of like entering inputs and outputs, and what's the point, right? Like I'm not really solving a puzzle, I'm just like doing a mechanical thing. Similar thing happens a lot to me with Worldle, which is a similar game, but it's like with countries of the world. I don't know countries of the world nearly as well as I know words in the English language. Um, and so like there'll be like countries I'll try and like narrow it down, and then I at some point have to go to, Google Maps and start, fiddling around because I don't know where, say, Zambia is exactly. That kind of thing. But it also feels like cheating, right? It's like like I justify it to myself because like, well, I don't know it, and I won't know it. I can't figure like I don't know like if the countries say in Africa, I don't know the geography of Africa well enough to kind of like guess my way there. Whereas I might be able to do that with like parts of Europe, right? I played enough CK3 that I can usually get the Balkans countries, right? Um, uh, but because that's like the whole point of the game, it feels worse to look that up rather than like if this was like some game where like one of the clues is like it's like enter the name of this like there's a country that's the password, and like it spins up like the border of the country and you're supposed to use that as like the password, right? Like this is like an example of a puzzle I'm constructing in my head. It would feel less bad to go look that up because like that's not like the whole game, right? Like that's just like a piece of it.
Yeah, by the way, I'm doing Worldle right now.
Uh,
Shit's hard.
yeah,
It's harder than I expected.
yeah.
I got the country right next to it. What the fuck is this country?
What is today's Worldle? Let me see.
We're doing it live on stream.
Oh,
February 6th, Worldle.
um, I believe I feel like I know where that is. Oh, but is it do? I got it. I do know what it is.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. I wonder if I can get. I wonder
most-
if I can get there. God no.
Mostly because I've been doing Worldle enough that so like after you get it, it asks you what are the neighbors. Like my justification to myself about Worldle is like I don't know these things, so I should learn them maybe. And so I've been doing it enough that like I've started to learn some of the countries of Africa. They also have a state.
This is a particular country in northern Africa. I know I could go. It's fucking me up that I know I could go look it up. And that I'm clearly getting all of the countries around it, but I haven't gotten it itself. But I almost sort of think that this process is.
Where do you think? Where do you think it is? Say, what part of Africa?
Oh man, am I wrong? Is it not northern Africa?
No.
Am I a fucking idiot? I guess I don't. Huh. Now I'm reconsidering everything. But interestingly, I think that this thought process actually kind of speaks to where or how I like want to. Oh my god. It's West Africa, isn't it? Is that right? Or am I a dingus?
It is on the western coast of Africa, but
God.
not a particularly northern
I should
part.
just do one more guess just to get it out of my system. What could it couldn't be the Congo. The Congo is landlocked. This is clearly on a coast, I'm sure. Let's just go, you know what? Mozambique. Sure, let's find. Oh my God. Also right around there. All right, let's take a look. No, Namibia. Okay. Yeah, okay. This actually makes sense. I am a huge dingus because I did in fact forget where some of these countries were located.
Yeah, no, before I started doing this, I could not, like, if you had told, like, if you had asked me, like, is Zimbabwe landlocked, I wouldn't have been able to tell you.
Yeah, I don't think I would have been able to tell you either. Yeah, I thought Angola and Botswana, which were the two that I got, were in Northern Africa. And then I guess I just sort of underestimated the amount of smile because I got 75% of the way there with uh uh Libya and Algeria, but yeah, I guess 6,000 kilometers is quite a ways away, right? And that feeling of I kind of feel like a dingus, right? Like I kind of feel stupid for having missed like having missed what this country was, right? I feel like that's part of what makes how puzzles work, right? Like when you are doing Wordle, you get to the final thing, you know that the word ends in RUEL, and you guess gruel when it is cruel, or something like that. Do you know what I mean? And you're just like, God damn it. Like, I can't believe I missed this, right? Or something kind of, like, something sort of along those lines. This is part and parcel for how I feel like we approach puzzle solving in games, right? And the ways in which I don't even know how I want to like describe this. It's just like the ways in which puzzles become game mechanics to sort of solve, right? Because I think that there are I was doing a puzzle recently for an indie game that we're thinking about publishing, right? In the puzzle there's a flower. The flower has 8 petals, right? You can click the petals essentially like a button. It'll flash red for a second. And then in a completely unrelated thing, there is a set of animals in a storybook, and they all have a flower shirt on, and one of the petals is red, right? And one of the 8 petals. And when you look at that puzzle on its face, you go, "Oh, okay." So my first thought was I just need to click these on, but it's not a toggle, it's an order, right? You have to do them in order. It's like, okay, well, from left to right, let's do them all in order. This also doesn't work. Okay, well, then I realized there's an issue with one of the animals where in the story he's wearing his shirt sort of upside down, right? And in the story the person tells him to flip it right side up. So you do the same puzzle but with that one input flipped up for down, essentially. And that's it. And it's like that's a satisfying puzzle to solve because it has sort of this build up of clues and information and this kind of like progression to figure out what's like really kind of like going on. But I could also see people really get stuck on that puzzle and be like, "Oh, I just had no idea. I have no conception for why it's not working," because they might miss that shirt flip clue or something along those lines.
Yeah. And the interesting thing there too is that like all of that knowledge is like in the game, right? Like there, like if you don't know that Namibia is a country, there is no way in hell that you're going to be able to like guess Namibia, right? In Worldle, right? Like you can't deduce that, right? Because that's like an external effect. Also, before I forget, you said that Congo is landlocked. Both the Republic of the Congo and the Democratic Republic of the Congo have small coastlines. Just want to correct you for the folks at home.
True. Yeah, that is fair enough. Yeah, obviously that big that big landmass in the middle of the Democratic Republic of the Congo is like what I would think of, and I think what most people think of. But technically speaking, it has a tiny little coastline.
Yeah. But anyway, point being is I think that's like an interesting observation about like how about like the way that how people can interact with these puzzles. And I don't know if a game like Pokemon Snap could work. I mean, I guess a game like Pokemon Snap could work today because Pokemon Snap exists and that like provides the fodder for like what like how it works, right? Like, but I don't know if like a truly new game like say like Pokemon Snap could like a new puzzle game that requires that kind of experimentation could work in a way that was like satisfying. Um, maybe it could. Like I think
Like,
you
like a new Pokemon Snap couldn't work and wouldn't be satisfying. You think?
well, it'd be tough. It'd be tough to do, right? Like I think
Okay.
a new like a Pokemon Snap 3, I think there's already a 2, right? Would work because if you play the original Pokemon Snap, you already have the context for like this is how you get like stuff to work, right?
Sure.
But like let's say that there's like another game that's like all these kind of like non-obvious puzzles, or like the non-obvious puzzles are like a big enough part of it that it's like central to the gameplay, but like not entire to the gameplay. Like how do you like how do you make that work without it like being feel like being it's like frustrating, right? Like 'cause the thing that's popping into my head is Tunic, right? I went on about this last week, right?
Yeah.
The puzzles in that game are not a core part of the game, but they are built to be solved in the game. But they are also like so kind of obtuse and frustrating that at least I felt like I didn't want to go. I didn't want to like sit there and like stare at it until I could figure it out, right? But I also don't like. But I also like was kind of aggravated about it because like it felt like I hadn't signed up for it, and it was kind of central to the way the game works. Like something like the Hornswoggle Horde in WoW, right? I'm not gonna get aggravated about that because it's like a little thing, right? Like it's not like you know the keys to defeating the raid aren't hidden behind that kind of puzzle, right? Um, but in Tunic, like the true ending is, and it's like an essential part of the game, even though that's like not the game I've been playing up until that point. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think I agree, especially because like I've had this experience a lot in the indie space. So, like for instance, the Dark Side Detective. Um, there's one puzzle in the second game that is basically about just clicking the right pixel, right? Um, there is a thing that is very small. You have to open a locker, right? You go onto a certain screen and you open a locker, and on that locker is a flyer, and you click the flyer, and that is the key piece to progress you into the rest of the game, right? You can't go any further unless you do that piece of the puzzle. And funnily enough, when I was doing this puzzle, it was before the game had come out, so there's no crowdsourcing, right? I'm essentially the first person, well, like one of the first people to actually like go through the experience of doing this thing. The only thing that got me there was just like moving my mouse across the screen. I was like, what hotspots am I missing in this point and click adventure? And eventually I saw it. I saw the hotspot that said flyer, and I was like, oh my god, I've never clicked on this. Boom, that's it. That's like all you needed in order to get there. And I feel like there is something uniquely frustrating about the that nature of things. Which is, being locked out of my ability to progress because I'm failing on like a deductive level this way, right? If I'm locked out of my ability to progress because I'm not comprehending the puzzle that the game is setting me up for, right? Which is, oh, you need to use the tape on the knife in order to tape the knife to the baseball bat so that you can have this weapon to attack a demon or something like that, right? Like a very typical adventure game puzzle. I would understand kind of along those lines, but just like I didn't see this hotspot on screen when I went to the screen and click it appropriately, like preventing me from progressing. That feels kind of uniquely, I guess, uniquely bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, and this was a common complaint even before the internet age about adventure games. They were just like pixel hunts. Like the logic wasn't like sound, right? It's like use the rubber chicken. I think the one of the examples is like I think it's from Monkey Island. Use rubber chicken on the pulley to like slide down the rope, right? Which
Mhm.
is like that doesn't like make a ton of like it makes like it's funny, but like it doesn't make enough sense that you can necessarily intuit it.
Yeah.
And it just quickly comes to like when I was like a little kid, I beat the old LucasArts adventure game Loom, And there were a lot of sections there where like I could not figure out what to do, so it was just kind of like try everything on every
Yep.
interaction point, right? Like I remember very early on, one of the steps you need to do is like a cast open on the sky, and that like cause lightning bolt to hit like a tree, and that's like how you advance to the next major part of the game. Um, but like it took me like I feel like I felt like forever as a kid. Um, but like it was just like I ran out of things to do, and I didn't have any other way to advance. So because again, internet wasn't a thing, so I just had to try everything. Um, but I think that like the ability to go look things up has kind of like killed that as a mode of play, if that makes sense. Um, because like there's no like if you get frustrated, you can go look it up, and then you can kind of get mad at the game for like the puzzle being stupid, but at least you're not wasting your time. I don't know. I feel like this is part of why like adventure games like aren't as much a thing anymore. Um, like they all have to have like some like real deductive element to it. Like the closest thing to like adventure games that I think are like visual novels, which usually have something else going for them, or like
Yep.
like Return of the Obra Dinn, which is like a murder mystery. And for one of those, like I got almost all of the puzzle or all of the things solved in Obra Dinn except for one, and I thought it was like a not a terrible a great clue, but I felt bad having to look it up. It's just like this is the only one I can't get, and like I'm looking at it, I just can't figure out what it's supposed to be, right? Like what the clues are supposed to be telling me, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, I don't know. Do we have thoughts about like what makes a successful puzzle in kind of the modern era?
So I guess I want to say that it requires a certain amount of intuition, right? But I don't know that I could give. It's tough, right?
Yeah,
So for instance, in the Dark Side Detective example that I gave, that was a piece of the process that game went on that game used in its development cycle in order to identify where to place hints, right? So for instance, I'm pretty sure at that point of the puzzle, if you are kind of stuck there, you will get a hint that sort of points you in that direction in the way that like clicking on stuff will return sort of like random information, but like you can use that as a way to sort of direct the player and say, you
sure.
know, you should check whatever. You should check flyers around the high school to see if anybody offers this service that you need, right? That kind of a thing. But there's really no way that you can design for it. It's just sort of trial and error. And I was the trial, or I was the error in that
Right.
spot. And we needed to find enough errors in order to input right kind of protections in order to help make it sort of intuitive on sort of a group level. I don't know. I don't know what the right way to approach that is, especially because it is really a fine line to walk. I felt great about figuring out that puzzle with the flower. Okay. I felt really good about figuring out that puzzle. I was like, oh, I understand. I went boom, boom, boom. It hits the perfect kind of. I didn't get it immediately, which would make it too easily. And I didn't get stuck on it. I just kind of progressed through the reasoning until I finally kind of deduced or induced, whichever one it is, what I was supposed to do. But I am stuck on a puzzle in that demo, and I have been stuck there for about 10 minutes, and I just don't know where to go next. I just don't know how to progress next. I found a compass, and the compass is missing it has there's a north, south, east, west, and then there's a little symbol near the north, and there's a corresponding shelf that has north, south, east, west, and the symbols, but the symbols on the compass are scratched off, or like it actually looks like the symbols are a coin, and the coins have fallen off, maybe. But I can't. I haven't. I just haven't figured it out. What the fuck am I supposed to do with that? I haven't figured it out yet. Um, and so it is tough to really hit that sweet spot where you get the feeling of, yes, I did it. I solved it, and I didn't need anybody else's help. I figured it out on my own.
Yeah. No, I agree. It is really hard to like hit that spot and have it like land and work well because like you know I think Baba is you is a very smart game, but I found the puzzles to be frustrating at times because I just couldn't figure out what to do, right? I have historically really enjoyed, like, say, the Phoenix Wright games, but there were times where I came down to, like, I guess I just gotta, like, try every option to see what goes forward. Um,
Yeah. I wonder if brute force is the correct sort of release valve in that way, right? Like lower the amount of sort of options so that if somebody has to brute force an answer, they don't spend 8,000 years on it, right? So for instance, in a game where you have a combination lock, maybe like a little roll up lock or whatever, can't brute force that. Like
yeah,
that is maybe not a great puzzle, or at least a great puzzle to really challenge somebody, right? You can at least put your answer in a way that is, pretty obvious, that you would expect most people to get intuitively, right? But in any situation where you're really asking people to dig for an answer like that, you are hard locking somebody who doesn't find that sort of number key somewhere, somewhere out there.
yeah, and I feel like if that's the point of the game, you kind of have to like you kind of like have to be okay with that being how it goes, I guess, right? Because otherwise, like, what is an escape room game without puzzling over the different stuff, right? Like, otherwise there's no game there. Um,
Yep.
I think an interesting point of comparison is I've been playing a lot of God of War Ragnarok recently, a game that has been lambasted because the other characters will like give you like approximately 3 seconds to solve a puzzle before they start shouting the solution at you. Um, I think they patched it to be less because I've found it to be less. But like
Okay.
in the general case for me, the puzzles aren't super hard. I can generally solve them on my own. If I can't, at some point they'll shout something at me, and it'll work. I've been stuck a couple of times, but that's been like I have missed like a ledge to climb up on, right? And googling solves that, but like excuse me, that doesn't really feel that bad. That just feels like par for the course. Um, and I think I think it's easier to design puzzles in the space where it's not your primary gameplay loop because like obviously you've got other things you want to do, right? Like
Yep.
um, it is okay for WoW to be this kind of like obtuse puzzle, like or there's a Hornswogg horde to be this obtuse puzzle because um, if I can't figure it out, I will go do a world quest or something, right? Or like run a mythic and like
Yeah.
wait for
What
somebody else to
was
solve it.
the witness, I want to call it,
Yeah,
the
that
the
was like
Jonathan Blow
Bloat game.
game.
I never, I have never played it, but it's on the list of games to
You
play.
know, it is remarked. It has very positive on Steam, so I guess that's something.
Yeah,
Even though I remember at the time people being very frustrated with this game,
I
and the way its puzzles were designed.
part of that I think is that Jonathan Blow was kind of a blowhard, and was
Mhm.
like, you know, game like violence games bad, right? Like that kind of thing, right? And you know, I think some people were taking out their frustrations with Jonathan Blow on the game. Um, but also like the game isn't going to be for everyone, right? Like it is a puzzle game ultimately, and I think it's supposed to be a little bit more. I haven't played it myself, like I said, but it's not like my understanding is the puzzles aren't exactly like Baba Is You is a straightforward puzzle game in that like what you have to do, like the steps you have to generally take to solve the puzzle, are in front of you, right? Um, like some of these games, there's an aspect of solving how to solve the puzzle as
Yep.
like a pre-step, which I think can be particularly frustrating to people, um, especially if they don't know that's what they're getting into, right? Like Return of the Obra Dinn, the thing you are doing is like how you solve the puzzle is in front of you, right? Um, it's and so like you can derive all the things. Like I'm not sure that like the witness had that aspect to it. I'm not sure. Um, there's also things where like puzzles are like not like the solutions to puzzles are not important enough that you need to get all of them, right? Like in a lot of things like these classic N64 games you were talking about, a lot of like the puzzles or secrets were things that would lead to like a power up or like currency, right? Like there's a bunch of puzzles in Ragnarok that just lead to like a chest full of hack silver, and hack silver is useful, but like at the end of the day, if I miss those, it's not a big deal, right? Like, um,
Yeah, I mean, this is something we talked about in some of our tabletop episodes, right? Where, you know, I would talk about how I designed certain dungeons to have secret treasure hoards. And you asked me the question, you were like, is that part of what's the total party loot thing?
like
What's that
wealth by
called?
level.
Wealth by level. You were like, is that part of the wealth by level, you know, denomination that you do? Because at the time, what I was doing was I was taking wealth by level and I was sort of dividing it up among the loot for the dungeon, right? I expect that the dungeon you're going to level up in this dungeon sort of thing. Here is the loot that comes with that. It equals about the wealth by level increase, right? Down, because that's one of the things that I actually think is poorly explained in a lot of I don't know, it's probably better in Pathfinder 2e, you know, D&D 5e now kind of thing, but at the time when we were playing Pathfinder 1, it was very poorly explained how to divvy out rewards to characters, right? Generally speaking, that was something that was kind of put really on the GM to sort of figure out, and you could end up in these situations where you're giving characters really insane items because you're not you know properly sort of vetting their worth, right? But one of the things that you asked was for this were what was I using the wealth by level to inform these extra treasures, right? These secret treasures that were in a dungeon. And I told you, I was like, no, like the dungeon has 100% of that wealth. You will end the dungeon with 100% of that wealth. But I can't put a treasure chest behind a wall that you can make a perception check, an arcana check, and a, you know, I don't know, like a trickery check in order to like see that there's a false wall, dispel the illusion, and then, you know, pick the lock, right? In order to get what's in that treasure. I can't put some of that 100% of your wealth by level in there because it's so easy to miss and flub. And you have to make it into a world where you go, well, you failed the trickery check by 5 or more. The lock, you know, your lockpick snaps in the lock and it is irretrievably broken. You're not going to be able to get what's inside. Sorry, right? Like that kind of a thing. And I feel like that is the only kind of fair way to include those sorts of you know, like those sorts of rewards for puzzles that you have to build in the possibility that people won't be able to make it to the other side on, right? You have to be able to move on from that without altogether losing that much, which I guess is what Hawksilver is in the you know God of War example.
Yeah, yeah. It's hack silver, right? Like like chop, and it's just like it's just currency, right? Like it'd be like putting gold in a treasure chest in
Yeah.
in D&D. I mean, I think that's an interesting thing too because like in you need a way to signal that like you're missing some stuff, right? Like like God of War Ragnarok has like a list of all of like your completion, and like can encourage you to like go find things, right? Even if like if it's like, oh, you're missing a thing, go wander around until you find it. You can either do that or you can go look it up at your pleasure, right? I don't think it's a huge deal. Um,
Yep.
but like in D&D, like it's funny because in D&D, like a completely missed chest isn't like there's no like it's not like an easy way to signal that you've like missed the loot other than like the GM telling me like by the way there was a treasure chest that you missed, right? Like and I think that kind of signaling mechanism is actually kind of important for for like for 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 the mechanics to work and for like this is how like I think this is a big way of how it works like in video games, right? Like I'm playing Ragnarok, I will see a chest up on a ledge that I can't get to directly. It's like, oh, I have to go figure out how to get around and get to it, right? And I know that that's there, right? Um,
Yep.
and I think that's like and like I've been through that a lot, right? Like sometimes I like go too far along. It's like, oh, maybe I'll have hit the entrance later, and I never do, and so I have to backtrack to find it and like pull the thing up. But I think that that's like a core part of the game. That's easy to do in a video game. It's not easy to do in a TTRPG, but I think you kind of like need a way to do that, right? You need a way to be like, you see like a chest behind like a portcullis that is like frozen shut, but behind it like you see like a door, right? And so you can give the players a way to like figure that out. And I actually think talking that through that is an important part of puzzle design is like hinting at things that you can do in a way that like I bet you this did happen in Pokemon Snap. You can tell me because you've played it more recently, but like, I bet you there were like things that happened in the background that suggested like ways that things could interact to like get you to maybe like do a thing. Right? Does that make like?
Oh yeah, that is interesting, and I bet I would agree. I can't think of anything because I didn't play a ton of Pokemon Snap, so I think that's definitely the case. But it's not. Oh, actually, a better example of this would be like Assassin's Creed. So when I was playing Assassin's Creed Valhalla, there are treasures on your map, and those treasures are almost always a little puzzle. Whether that's a platforming puzzle, like you got to figure out where the entrance is, and then you go to a window and you use you could like shoot the lock of a door from the other side or whatever. So you got to figure out where to go in order to get that shot, and then you can walk around to the front of the door. But you see the door there, and you see the chest on the other side of the door, right? Or the portcullis or whatever it is. That's a pretty common thing. Ironically, I would actually sort of say that was frustrating in Assassin's Creed. It sort of the thing that was interesting about it was everything was a puzzle, and I kind of came to resent that. Right. It's sort of like if every puzzle, if every treasure chest on the map in World of Warcraft was the Hornswoggle Hollow. It's sort of what that felt like. Where it's like, God, it might like, I don't even care what this thing is. It's gonna give me like gloves I'm never gonna use, but whatever. I just want to see it, right? And you go through this whole thing, takes 5 minutes or whatever. And I'm sure that someone in the process was like, you can't just leave that treasure chest lying around. Make a little puzzle about it, like put it behind this thing and make a little puzzle. And I'm sure some designer like kind of like did that. But at the end of the day, it kind of became frustrating because there was nothing that was sort of like easily attainable, right? When I'm just riding through the countryside on my fucking horse, sometimes I just want to see a treasure chest and I just want to walk over and I want to hit the button and boom, there it is, kind of thing, right? But when everything was a puzzle, it kind of got on my nerves.
Yeah,
In a weird way.
I totally get that. That makes total sense to me, right? Like I feel like in order for the puzzles to really hit, you need to have like some stuff that's like not a puzzle, um, or maybe mix it up, right? Like make it a combat challenge or something.
Yeah, like in WoW, you have treasure chests for like these expedition scout packs. You have these little disturbed dirt things if you have a shovel for it or whatever. Those can sometimes be a little hidden, right? They can sometimes kind of be like hidden under a bush, or some scenery, or kind of or whatever else. But there are also plenty of them that are just normal. They're just right there on their face, right? And you don't have to make a whole thing happen in order to fly down on my dragon and get it.
Speaking of which, can you make the sturdy shovels? I might send you some work orders.
Yeah, I can make sturdy shovels on Baron. Yeah, hell yeah, let's go.
But yeah, yeah, no, I mean, I think that's like gotta really be a part of it, right? Is like fitting it to like the expectations of your game, right? Like Assassin's Creed Valhalla is probably not mostly about assassinating at that point, but like either assassinating or like combat, right? And like doing the puzzle solving is like a secondary thing. Like I think God of War Ragnarok is good at kind of like striking that balance. Like there's some puzzly aspects to it, but mostly it's just about like running around and fighting stuff, and like doing the story beats, and eventually there's satisfying bite-sized chunks in the minute, and yeah, you'll eventually get back to it. But like I feel like if everything was super easy, right? Like if it was super easy, like in Baba Is You, or rather, sorry, if Baba Is You was like super easy the whole time, it wouldn't be a fun game because like that's the whole point, right? The point of the game is to be like mind-numbingly frustrating because like that's the challenge, right? Like if you could do it off the bat, then it wouldn't be a good game.
Yep.
Yeah. You have any further thoughts on this?
Do I have any further thoughts on this? I don't know. I feel like we've about covered it. We're kind of at the end of
Yeah.
we're kind of at the end of it. I don't know. I was just an interesting sort of thing I was noticing when I was going back to these retro games. Maybe just a transition into, weeks. Going back to some of these N64 games is kind of a fucking trip, to be honest with you. I forgot how small the aspect ratio is, right? Not just in the sense of we're playing on 4:3 instead of 16:9, but also in the sense of we're playing at like 240p rather than, whatever, right? Do you remember when 720 used to be high definition?
Yeah,
720
yeah.
was like high definition, then you got 1080p kind of like remade as high definition. God, like what a weird world.
There is definitely I know, and you can like see like go like look up simulations. A part of it too is that like when TVs were still predominantly CRTs, like that did interact with like the art in a certain way to like make it look less bad. I don't know like the exact scientific reasons behind it, but like you can like go look at people who's like this is what it looks like clean, and this is what it looks like with the simulated CRT over it, and it like definitely like makes it look slightly better. And I think it's kind of like it's that happens with everything though, right? Like occasionally they'll play like footage of like an old football play and it'll be like, Jesus Christ, I can't even like see anything that's happening on the field, right? Like it's because it was recorded in low resolution. Um
Yeah.
yeah. Um
Weird, very
yeah,
weird
yeah.
going back to it. Though I do quite enjoy the experience of coming back to, especially Yoshi's Story. I kind of forgot. There's a lot of little stuff in Yoshi's Story that is, you know, fun. There's just like fun stuff in there. Um, when it comes to, I don't know, I it's probably one of the only platformers that I have beaten. Like I've gotten all however many, I've gotten all the way to the end and kind of like beaten the final boss. But it's funny how like a boss fight in the original in Yoshi's Story was a guy goes invisible and you see the little shimmer of him moving. And I immediately understood what was happening in the boss fight, but because the resolution was so garbage, I was like, I can't fucking see shit. I'm playing on my giant TV, right? I was like, where the fuck, where is he? And it's like that kind of thing actually sort of works just because of the nature of the low resolution.
That makes sense. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. Um
Yeah.
yeah. I remember not being able to figure out how to get past those elephants like the first time I played Yoshi Story because I feel like I was like in like late elementary school maybe. Um or maybe it was even like middle elementary school, but like
Yeah, it's the little elephant with the stop sign.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. The answer is you ground pound and then jump over them. But it's actually kind of hard to make that jump work.
yeah. I mean, it's also one of those things where like, I think when I got I like rented it from Blockbuster, and that doesn't come with the manual, right? So I didn't even know you could ground pound, which I think was the issue. I like remember printing things off of GameFAQs to like play games to play with games. 'Cause, like I just didn't, like that was like the early kind of like, in those early kind of like but like that's still kind of like I think like word of mouth era, right? Because like even though it's like guides on the internet, it's still just people talking about it, right? And it's not like they're authoritative sources, right? It's not like, you know, every time I Google something that I miss in God of War, there's like 4 different sites that like have some like person professionally quote unquote doing it, right? Like writing up how to actually solve the stuff. Um, rather than game FAQs was still felt like a rumors era type thing. Um, yeah. Um, yeah. But so I guess what else did you do with your week? How was your week?
Man, what else did I do? Just some normal, straightforward playing World of Warcraft, playing Hearthstone. The new thing that has actually been kind of funny is in Hearthstone is so there's Hearthstone Classic, right? When Hearthstone went to a yearly rotation of its standard set, right? People bought classic cards and those cards are no longer usable in the main game. So what they did was they created Hearthstone Classic. And what Hearthstone Classic sort of says is you can, you know, uh you can play with the very base set that Hearthstone launched with in 20 whatever it was, 2014, 2015 kind of thing. Um Nobody that game mode was fun for a while and people were into it, but nobody really stuck around and eventually it got taken over by bots. And then people were like, "Oh, this game mode is completely taken over by bots, you can hit legend really easily just by being a reasonably good player and playing against these bots. And I remember playing OG Control Warrior with my classic deck, and I was like, can I play a Control Warrior deck against like, you know, these dingus bots or whatever, and like get to legend? And the answer is sort of no. By the time it blew up, I was actually facing a lot of humans, but I was able to play Control Warrior, and it's glorious. I all I want is a good Control Warrior deck. It's the only thing I want. I spend hundreds of dollars on Hearthstone over the course of a year or whatever. You know, because you buy the $60 thing every time. That's $200 by the end of the year, basically. All I want for my $200 is a good Control Warrior deck. The only time that game is truly ecstatic for me is when I'm playing a good Control Warrior deck. All other decks pale in comparison to a good Control Warrior deck. There's some interesting stuff happening in the meta in Hearthstone too, which I thought was really neat. Basically, there's one card that was basically a 0-mana 3/5 with Rush. So a 0-mana 3/5 hits the board. It was in Rogue, and it was taking advantage of sort of a Rogue card that said you start the game as another class until you play your first Rogue card. You play a Rogue card for the first time, right? So you start the game as a mage, you start the game as a hunter, you start the game as a warrior, whatever. But then you play your first Rogue card, and it's like, boom, mask off. I was actually a Rogue the whole time. Very tricky, very flavorful, right? The card is like a 3/2. You're running like a River Crocolisk, basically. Maybe it's a 2/3, I don't remember. In order to like activate this effect. But there's another card in the game called Wildpaw Knoll that says for each card from another class you add to your hand, you reduce this mana cost by 1. It starts at 5, right? Well, the thing that was happening was a rogue on turn 1 draws a card, but they are not a rogue. They are a shaman, let's say. So when they draw their rogue card, they're reducing the cost of Wildpaw Knoll, right? And so they were doing some trickery to basically get this thing to cost 0. And it was acting as their sort of board defense for the whole deck, right? You would keep your Knolls in the mulligan. You'd get your Knoll out turn 2 or turn 3. Whatever early initiative a deck got onto the board would just immediately get blown out by these Wildpaw Knolls that would, like, even if you got past them, right? Like, it's trading 2 for 1. You're investing resources. It's slowing you down enough to kind of like get into its sort of its winning position, which is really neat, really interesting. And that interaction eventually got changed where it basically says non-rogue cards, right? So it is meant for the traditional Burgle effects, which is add a card from another class to your hand, and it's triggering off of, it's triggering off of those effects rather than off of the effects of, the effects of the Maestra drawing these rogue cards, putting them in your hand, that kind of a thing. This actually opened up the game to be incredibly board centric all of a sudden, because this one nerf has actually made it that fighting for the board and establishing a board in turns 1, 2, and 3 is actually like incredibly important now. And so all of these kind of aggro decks that have been more or less sort of like kind of pushed out of the meta, and we were kind of in like a mid-range kind of combo place where there's a lot of like damage from hand. Now Unholy Death Knight, which is like a token sort of like swarm the board, lots of refill strategy, like all that is sort of taking off. Funnily enough, Enraged Warrior is taking off, and Enraged Warrior is an interesting deck that I've been playing, because against it's you would call it mid-range in a traditional sense, because against other aggressive decks it tends to play slow, which is it's focused on trading and removing the opponent's board, and then you tend to sort of blow them out with value in turns like 6, 7, and 8. But against control decks, you're playing aggro, you're playing aggressive, and you're getting a lot of stuff on the board. And there is ridiculous damage from hand in that deck, in a way that if that deck was ever good, people would fucking complain about it so hard. I have blown people out from like 17 health just by using charge minions and stuff that is not traditionally like capable to sort of be play around, but is actually really fun and really interesting in this metagame. We're expecting a mini set in the not too distant future, and I'm hoping to God that it just gives some interesting, compelling control warrior tool to sort of close out games. My hopes are not all that high, but we'll sort of we'll come and see. But I don't know. That's where I am in my Hearthstone career, in my Hearthstone life. What have you been doing? What have you been playing?
So, some WoW. I've finally gotten to the point where like I'm less like I'm not like just kind of like jamming out it every day anymore, which is fine. I'm like playing like I'm in kind of that like holding pattern. Um, what else? The trade. We should maybe talk about the trading post stuff. This is the
Oh
first.
yeah, sure.
Um,
Uh, where do you fall on the trading post? Have you like enjoying it? What do you think?
I think it's neat. But it's buggy as shit. Like today, I finished my trading post. I have not gotten the mount. And this is vaguely aggravating me, but like, it's 6 days into the month, so I'm sure they'll fix it. And like I continually had issues where like I would open up the trading post journal and they would say I had no progress, and then I'd do /reload and it would show my progress. I am a little bit aggravated that like it like it feels like I should be able to like keep earning credits past the thing. I guess that's the part of the point, is that you can't get everything, but it's like, there are things I want maybe out of this month's rotation that like I can't afford. Like I can't get enough currency to afford. Um, I can freeze some of them, but like there's also this thing in my head where it's like, oh shut, like I don't particularly like the mount, like the celestial horse mount. But I froze it initially just because like it was like, oh well, that's the high value thing. That's the thing I should be saving for. But maybe I won't. Maybe I'll freeze something that I like a little bit better. But like, I don't know. There's some neat stuff in there. There's some like, I don't know. I don't mind the mechanics so much. I just, I don't know. Do you have thoughts on it?
My orientation around the trading post is probably different than a lot of people's. Just because I don't see it as I see it as essentially login rewards. Probably the fairest version of like a daily login reward that I can think of, but it's not daily, it's monthly. It's sort of in my head. Here's what I think happened. Somebody went to the WoW room and they were like, "We need a good reason for people to log in and keep their World of Warcraft subscription during a content drought. What is something that we could do that would provide that?" And somebody went, "Why don't we create this special shop that uses in-game currency that like you can only get by doing in-game stuff, can't buy it or whatever. But it's monthly, it rotates every month. It's not hard to max it out, right? You can do it in a day if you are like really kind of like focused on it. But it does rotate out, like the stuff in it will rotate out. So if you miss a month, like you can still get that stuff a little bit later down the line, but there is that incentive for you to get online and play your game. Maybe an even more that sort of has elements of sort of like FOMO, in kind of in the incentive direction, like fear of missing out or whatever, which is sort of a term that I hate in like regards to it. But maybe an even more charitable reading of it would be to say, we wanted to reward players who do have that, who do have that consistency, and who are, sticking with us during the content drought. So we're doing this special thing just for them. That's kind of like the best case sort of scenario. I don't think a lot of players look at it that way, because I think players dissolve like ingest this information in frankly pretty poor ways. So for instance, there is an achievement. Oh, okay. One of the first things that was data mined when it came to the trading post was Warden armor, right? Wardens are important characters in World of Warcraft lore. Maya of Shadowsong is a warden. She was a featured character in Warcraft 3. There were, heroes in for the Night Elf faction in Warcraft 3. We have seen Warden armor in game before, because Wardens were a big piece of the Legion story. But no one has been able to actually wear Warden armor yet. Then the trading post hits the PTR. bunch of data mining happens. People see the warden appearances are tied to the trading post, and everybody goes, "Yay! I'm so excited for this!" Right? A couple weeks later, right? Because this is all on PTR data. This is all PTR data mining. You can't access it. You can't see anything. A couple weeks later, the trading post actually goes live on the PTR, and people are understanding how it works. And part of that is an achievement that says, visit the trading post once a month. You visit the trading post, 12 different times, right? Which essentially means visit the trading post once a month for a year, right? And people start losing their fucking minds, right? Because and tied to that achievement is the warden armor. I'm excuse me. People start losing their fucking minds because in their heads, what they saw was, oh, the warden armor is going to hit the trading post. Now they're like, wait, what? I have to log in once a month for a year. I'm not going to be able to get this until next year. This is bullshit. I'm angry. And there was like a whole fucking controversy around this thing. But the bottom line of that controversy, the reason that controversy existed, is entirely based off of people coming to incorrect conclusions about the thing from the data mining, right? They kind of convinced themselves of what it should be, and when the thing doesn't meet their expectations because it's being explained properly for the very first time, that becomes like a weird and sort of like a frustrating experience. And I think that core experience has kind of trickled into a lot of the discourse that I've been seeing around the trading post. People are mad about the fact that things rotate, that you can't buy out the shop every time. What if I want everything in the shop? People are angry that you can't earn more than just kind of the max allotted amount. And I sort of feel like that's sort of against the point, right? It feels to me like the point of the trading post is you don't have to farm for it. You just kind of naturally get it. I didn't farm for the trading post tenders. I just played the game. I was completing world quests. Boom, here's 200 tenders. I did some mythics this week. Here's 200 tenders, right? And this is in the first week that it's live, right?
Are they actually called tenders?
Yeah, they're called traders tenders. Tendies.
Yeah. Good boy points for your tendies.
Yeah. Listen, it's that episode of Community, right? The chicken tenders.
Oh yeah.
Oh God, what a good episode. Also makes me want to eat chicken tenders so bad right now.
But yeah, so I definitely feel a lot of those kind of frustrations. I think you're right. I think it is based on FOMO, right? It's supposed to, like, it's rotating, right? Like it's rotating. You have to get it, and you can't choose everything, so you have to choose your stuff, and you have to keep coming back because maybe the thing that you wanted that you couldn't get, like your fifth favorite thing that you couldn't afford, right? Like it'll come back, right? Like at some point, or like your sixth favorite thing because the fifth one you froze or whatever. But if you freeze something and you don't buy it, right? Like, or if you freeze something, that means it's something you have to buy with currency later that you can't get, next month, right? Like,
Yeah.
that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
I would like, to me, it's not FOMO. I do think FOMO in stores like this is bad, which is frustrating, right? So for instance, I don't like the way that Fortnite does a rotating store because there's no guarantee that anything is going to come back to it. But we know that stuff is going to rotate back into the trading post, right? Which makes me feel like it's okay. It's not really FOMO. It's just you just check in every once in a while. It'll come back. It'll come back in kind of the rotation. When something is, you can only get this thing by doing this thing this way, like this season or something like that. Like you can only buy it while it's in the store this season. That's when it bugs me, right? When it is, I can only get it for the next 5 days. Otherwise, after that, I'm like boned. That sucks. The only way in which I think that that's permissible is when it is an achievement marker, right? So, for instance, KSM mounts I think are good FOMO in the sense that I have the KSM mount for every season for Shadowlands, for instance. So, well, it's because I put the work in, right? It's I was there. I geared my characters. I learned the dungeons. I completed this thing that is not trivial to do, and I got my mount reward from it. I'm sorry that you missed out on that, but you deserve to miss out on that because you did not put in the time and the effort.
Sure.
The missing out of I did not spend $15 is bullshit and unfair, and I think that's super lame and super dumb. So yeah, I guess, and then also the freezing thing is kind of interesting. I feel like that's pretty useful in terms of like being kind of consumer friendly, right?
Yeah.
But I also don't I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I haven't really like thought too much about it. I guess you know what? Maybe it's not more complicated than that. Maybe it's just like a neat little thing to be kind of consumer friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, though. It is definitely to get people to like log in once each month, right, to
Yeah.
see what's on the see what's on the list. In the chat, Lou says, "I think it's way too easy to complete with pretty much zero effort. I maxed out within 3 hours of play." Um, I don't think that's an issue if you have reasons otherwise to play. I think you're like, I think it might feel bad is if like, let's say I'm on a month-to-month subscription. It's like, you know what? I'm not gonna play in March. My raid group is already down heroic. There's nothing really new for me. I'm gonna like put it aside and like go play something else, right? Um, I don't know if like it's like all right, I'll play for March because the trading post is there. If it was more substantial, it might feel like a little bit more worth it to keep it, right? Like even if it's the same rewards, like oh, I had to like put some effort in to get the thing. But on the other hand, if it's like if it's easy, it's like well, it didn't like I can still play the other game, right? Like I just kept my subscription up. But at the same time, it kind of feels like you're paying $15. Like if it's so trivial that it's like it's mostly like logging in and doing like trivial stuff, that does feel like you're paying $15 for the trading post, which I don't know. This is an interesting thing because like, what if we approach this the opposite way around? What if like WoW is free and like you $15 just got you the trading post, which isn't quite the right scenario, but like I don't know. I think WoW gets a lot of goodwill by the fact that it came from an era where $15 a month was expected, and now it's like adding things on in an attempt to kind of like almost reverse catch up with like freemium games that do a lot like that that have like optional monthly service, like that they kind of like are trying like they have those daily login bonuses type deals,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like,
exactly. And that's sort of I don't know. That's kind of like sort of where I'm at. Mostly it seems like a huge positive in terms of collection, which is something that I really like.
yeah,
I think that WoW for a long time, it's been a little bit frustrating if you're like if you're someone who likes having a lot of alts, likes having a lot of appearances, who likes collecting a lot of these things. I don't think the game serves you all that well. There's not a lot of super, like there are like the tier there's a lot of expected stuff, the tier sets, the weapons from the raid or whatever. All that stuff is sort of fine. But I'm frustrated, especially like as a Mythic Plus player, right? And I've explained this before, getting the same appearances out of my dungeon cache from Mythic 0 all the way to Mythic plus 20s, right? The fact that I'm doing 20s should give me better appearances on my armor, and I'm not getting that. And that's something that pisses me off in a way. Um that said, there's also a piece of this that I think is outside of the context of like being a Mythic Plus player, but like being like a role player, right? Being able to find really unique appearances, set up transmogs for those unique appearances, having a sort of system in game that is dedicated to those things in a better way than like, for instance, Trial of Style would be pretty close to this. It just feels good, right? It feels good that there is this unique weapon model for the Fury of the Fire Lord, this flail, right? Like that's just like a neat bespoke model. There's that ensemble for the pirate gear, that was like NPC pirate gear, but has now been made sort of PC gear. There's that ensemble for the hood and the cloak that includes like the little chest piece or whatever. That's like a really neat armor effect that we haven't really seen in WoW yet, but it's in there now and it's on the trading post. So I think from that perspective, it's something that I enjoy quite a lot. It's something I enjoy quite a bit.
mm. Yeah, I see that. By the way, that like the model for the flail isn't quite unique. There's a null flail in the game, that I actually have and I enjoy quite a lot.
Right, that's true. I do remember.
It's
I
in somewhere in
do
the
remember
Azure
this.
span
Yeah.
because I have been waving it around recently. I like it because it's got like physics in it. So like if you like jiggle your character back and forth, the head actually like flops around. Um, so I've been enjoying that. But yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean like it's been out the feature's been out for less than a week and I maxed it out and I wasn't trying super hard. Like I did go and like fish 50 fish up to hit one of the points. I like logged into an alt to like drink the 7-day poison because I didn't want to
Uh,
have to deal with that. Um, But yeah. So actually, question: after a discussion last week, did you try Marvel Snap at all?
I didn't. I should have, but
Yeah, it's fine.
I didn't. Yeah.
I've been
Um,
playing that in between things. It's good fun. Um,
how have your locations been? How have your random locations been treating you? Are you getting screwed over?
so locations wise, not so much. But earlier today, I did have a moment where someone pulled a Killmonger out of like a random effect, and Killmonger kills all one cost cards. And I was running my weenies deck, and it just like totally like fucked me in the game. It's like, oh fuck this. Um, one of the few like it's like a retreat time, right? Like that's why I think the retreat mechanic is necessary in that game. It's like he plays Killmonger, he kills all my shit, and then he snaps. It's like, no, I'm leaving. Fuck you, right? Like yes, you did a great job. You like totally neutered my deck, but like I'm not fucking excuse me sticking around for this. Um, uh, I don't know. I find Killmonger to be frustrating against the weenies because it's like it feels like there's like it'd be weird to run Killmonger unless you were unless like you know you were anticipating a lot of people running a bunch of one cost cards. Well, maybe it's just value in the fact that like most people are running some one cost cards at some point and are probably playing at least one of them in your game. Um, but yeah, um, I bought the season pass just because like it's not like other game season passes where like you accelerate your development by having it, right? Like it's just
Yep.
like I had I was at level 47 before I bought it. And it was like, well, I'm basically already here, and I played it enough that I didn't feel too bad about giving them $10, so I did. Um, not so sure like the value is there, but I was glad I did it just to see what it was like. Um, my big pull out of it was the alt art for Kazar because he's like the 4/4 that like gives +1 to all of your weenies, to all your one cost characters. So like that's central to my weenie deck. So that's been good. And there's some interesting cards there, right? Like you get like Storm, which locks down a location. Um, so yeah, it's uh it's been a good time. Um, I also finished season 4 of Community. I forgot that it was like a half size season. Um,
Yeah, I think they're all half size seasons from now on.
yeah, that makes sense. I definitely enjoyed I enjoyed it more as the season went on. I think that level, I forget who the showrunners were in that season, but like famously not Dan Harmon. I think they started to like hit their stride towards the end of the season. Like I think that what was the name of it? Like uh the body switching, like the Freaky Friday episode. I thought that was pretty good. Um,
Yeah. Oh, I love that episode actually. I think that episode is really clever.
yeah, I agree. Um, and like I thought the season finale missed a little bit. Um, uh, but um, and I don't know how I feel about the kind of like crossover episode, like the heroic origins where everybody turns out to have been connected in their past. I don't know how I feel about it, but I thought it was a neat idea. At least I'm not so sure they landed it, but you know, like I said, I think they were really hitting their stride toward the end. And well, I'm glad that it got back to Dan Harmon, right? Like I don't think it would have necessarily been poorly served if they had kept running it for another couple seasons. I feel like they got to where they needed to be by the end of it. Um, you have strong opinions about season 4?
I'm gonna have to talk more about it when I rewatch it. My default is that there are some real bangers. I think I talked about the puppet
Yeah,
episode. The
yeah.
puppet episode with Jason Alexander we talked about last week. I think that one is not all time, community, but it is it is a good, solid, real community episode that deserves to kind of like be up there. I think I would probably agree that the overall sort of season is marginally worse than the overall season is marginally worse than the other seasons are, but I think those margins are like ultimately pretty slim. People who get really crazy about they call it the gas leak year. People who get really crazy about the gas leak year, I think, are mostly sort of I sort of want to say like reacting performatively in a way. I don't actually think it's borne out in the way the show itself is. Um,
I will say I think that some of the misses in that season are like weighted towards the beginning. So
sure.
like I do think they needed time to find their stride on it, right? Like some of those early episodes felt like almost weirdly felt like somebody doing a parody of a Community episode in a way, or like you know, Abed doing another show does a Community episode type of deal, right? Like, to be very meta about it. So I'm glad that, like like I said, I think they need a little bit while to find it, but they did find it. I think when the early episodes are worse, it's very easy to confirm like, oh, they got rid of the showrunner, it's going to be terrible, right? Like when the early episodes are worse, then it's easy to kind of like fall into that confirmation and kind of ignore the stuff that's like a little bit better later down the line.
Yeah, I actually forgot that there are some things in here that are pretty bad. The Halloween episode where they're in Pierce's house.
Yeah.
Not super great. Oh, Jeff and his dad for Thanksgiving. Wow, that was in this season. Did not love that one. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, okay. So the puppet one is the second to last episode. Oh, the dance one. I actually kind of forget about that Sadie Hawkins dance episode. That one's actually pretty funny. Oh my god. Yeah, okay. You're right. It's the back end. The back end of the season is actually pretty good. The front of the season it seems like is not great. That's okay, cool. Yeah, so the thing that I've been watching is Andor, which we have to do an episode.
Okay.
I you know what I tweeted? I
saw it's something about how like for the people like Andor is my Mando kind of.
Yeah. It's in Star Wars nerd. This is what I said. I was like, Star Wars nerds who hated The Last Jedi say the Mandalorian is the Star Wars they've always wanted. That's me with Andor. Andor is the Star Wars that I've always wanted. Oh my god, it captures everything that is so great about like the world, like the feeling of the Empire, right? Like I think all of the stuff that makes the Rebellion era just like a really interesting era with this like omnipresent oppressive empire that is like infiltrating all the like all of the idiosyncrasies of people's lives, all that stuff. And honestly, and part of it is just like I told this to Rachel, and Rachel said that it was just because I sort of look like Diego Luna. I just love Diego Luna. He's so good. He's such a great like guy to be leading a series like this. I'm only halfway through, so I've watched the first 6 episodes, and there are 12, so there's like quite a ways to go. We'll sort of see where it comes down on sort of like Star Wars stuff. But I think my Star Wars and I have been on again, off again, I guess, since the 2019 debacle that was Rise of Skywalker. But I'm feeling very on again after the sort of 1-2 punch of Obi-Wan and Andor, which are both, they just feel like they're Star Wars made for me.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah. What else? Are you? Ooh, do you want to? Do you want to trudge into the mud? Do you want to talk about Hogwarts Legacy stuff? Have you seen that?
I don't like Harry Potter, right? Like I've said this, right?
Okay, so the thing that I'm interested in is, did you see the IGN thing?
Yeah, well, like 9 out of 10. Sure, I don't like. I also saw like there's a trans character in the game, and all the other people are like, chuds or whatever. It's like, who cares? Like
I think I was talking to a friend of mine who said that he resented that Hogwarts Legacy became discourse, which I thought was pretty funny. I obviously I didn't care about the game, and I sort of get that because it it is like it seems to be the thing in gaming that people are talking about, and I almost wonder if it's just because it's something you can have a big argument about, right? Like you just fucking fight about it, right?
So I have always maintained that Twitter isn't real life, right?
True.
Like
that's definitely true.
That is definitely true, right? But like, never have I been on the outside of something I care so little about that is taking up so much of the discourse that's like, God, I fucking hate Twitter, right? Like, I was never going to play Hogwarts Legacy because I don't like Harry Potter, right? Yep. care about the political implications, about how much J.K. Rowling profits versus how much it's on the developers. I don't care because I don't like Harry Potter, right? Like, and like I just keep seeing these things pass by. It's like, oh, IGN gave it a 9 out of 10. Oh, there's like a trans character in like the opening scene. Oh, like, it's a bad Destiny ripoff. Oh, it's actually not very good. I don't care. I just don't care.
Is there any world in which you would be like open to like reinterpreting your view on Harry Potter, right? Like, well, let's say it's a 10 out of 10. People are saying it's better than Elden Ring. Would you give it a shot, or are you too like black-pilled on Harry Potter to even like consider that?
I don't think I'm black-pilled on Harry Potter to even consider that, but like there are like if someone was like, this is like Elden Ring but better, maybe I would. I just don't think I'm interested in like that type of game right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I guess there's a world in which I would play it if it was really that like hot, but like I just can't like. It would be hard for it to be like a game like I can't imagine a world in which a named blockbuster property tie-in game is good enough. Like it is good enough and unique enough that I felt like I had to play it.
Right? You played Jedi Survivor, the Star Wars game from Respawn?
No, I own it now, but I just like never got around to playing it. Right?
Yeah, me too. That's a good one. I actually we should go back to that.
Yeah.
Sarian recommended me that game. He was like, like, I'm sure this is on your radar or whatever, but like you should play this. And I was like, I should actually like sit down and go into it. It's funny because I kind of feel like that's what Harry Potter is like trying to be a Star Wars, right? Where it's like, oh, we can get away from Harry Potter himself, but we can like explore this world of like Hogwarts or whatever. I just think that world is kind of like infertile compared to something like Star Wars, which is very fertile, or any of these other sorts of universes that are similar. Warhammer would be another good example. Warhammer is very fertile for any of these kinds of games, such that I can play Vermintide, I can play Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay, I can play Total War Warhammer, and all of those are completely disparate experiences, but like they feel in kind of keeping with one another because the world is very sort of like fertile for the imagination. I don't think that somebody could convince me that Harry Potter is the next Elden Ring just because I don't think that the world of Harry Potter could ever support that unless there are truly massive revisions and retcons. Like maybe there is a world in which 30 years from now we do live in that, but like you would have to completely redesign so many fundamental aspects of the way that world works in order to like entice me into it. I think
part of the problem is that the world of Harry Potter is about Harry Potter, right? Like Harry Potter, the character, right? He is the chosen one in a way that is very central to him, right? Like there is the world around it, but it feels like it's like less there than like Star Wars in a lot of ways is the story of like the Skywalkers, right? But like there's enough of the rest of the universe happening that it's like you can still do things in its orbit. I think Warhammer is even better at it than Star Wars because like the Warhammer universe is like kind of sort of about like Karl Franz and like the bigger geopolitical stuff, but like it's like really doesn't trickle down to like the individual stuff like you get out of like Vermintide or whatever. And it's also about like larger scale conflicts than like individual people, right? Like I feel like a Dune game would have the same problems, right? Because like Dune is about the Atreides line in a lot of ways, and it like the books all kind of.
Oh yeah, it's like that. Do you remember that 4K game or 4X game that we were talking about?
The Dune game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That came out, right?
Yeah.
That is like very intrinsic to the you are playing as the Atreides, right? Or you are playing as the Freeman, right? Or the Fremen.
Yeah, I mean I think part of it is like how much the rest of everything is hinted at mattering, right? Like it feels like in Star Wars other things matter. Like, and I think Dune is like very well done and other things matter in Dune, but like so much of like the Atreides line is such like an overriding force in the universe. It feels like everything else is kind of pointless, whereas that doesn't feel that way in Star Wars um or Warhammer, right? And Harry Potter is like I think the version, like is like the ultimate version of this, where like everything really is kind of about Harry Potter, right? Like, um, and not that that's like like that's perfectly fine for a story, but I don't think that lends itself well to like a game adaptation, uh, as
Yeah,
such.
I also just think that the world building has a lot of issues that like how do
Yeah,
you overcome them, right? How would one make an RTS or like a 4X game out of like of Harry Potter? Am I like operating units of my military around a map or something like that? It's like, these fundamental things that exist in the universe of teleportation or whatever else. I feel like they kind of ruin your ability to sort of like play with the universe in like a fun or interesting way.
yeah, I agree. I mean, part of that is just like construction. Like part of that I think is sloppy writing, right? Like
Mm,
I have like kind of beaten this drum a lot of times, right? Like fucking what's the fucking sport? Quidditch.
Quidditch, yeah.
Quidditch is a
How
terrible
much
fucking
Quidditch
game.
sucks.
We've
Yeah,
been over that. But like the plot device, like the existence of time turners is fucking ludicrous, right?
yep.
Like they like, but we we've been over all this, like you said. But like also like there's some aspects that like for to the point like aren't like the writing's fault, right? Like it's set in kind of like the pseudo modern world, right? Like you can't do a 4X game in the Harry Potter world because there's nothing to 4X, right? Like unless you're like I don't know playing wizard colonialists in like
I guess that's true.
like a
I just
Harry
mean to say
Potter mod for
like I don't feel like Harry Potter lends itself to different genre. You know what
yeah
I mean? Like I feel
yeah
like the fundamentals of the game make it so that, or the fundamentals of the world make it so that I feel like I couldn't create a game that makes sense kind of along those lines. You know, obviously yeah, obviously it being set in the modern world, you also can't really make a 4X game out of like X-Men, right?
yeah
Because it is similar. Even though I would say that X-Men is a much more fertile sort of like
yeah yeah
piece of world building, and there are really good X-Men games out there that deal with sort of like the mutants and the Xavier Academy, all this other sort of stuff.
yeah. It's weird because like you don't get like kind of like everybody that's a wizard is kind of like a person, right? In terms of
Mm,
like how they act. Like I guess and they can be better at different things, but it's not like like X-Men. Like the thing that popped in my head is like you could do like XCOM for X-Men, right? Like
yep.
and you could kind of
It's
sort of do
Midnight Suns, right? Marvel
yeah
Midnight Suns is essentially that.
sure right yeah but you can't really do like XCOM for Harry Potter because like how are the like how are the wizards different? Do you like have Harry like ride around in a Quidditch broom and like have Hermione be slightly better at spells or something um
Yeah, no clue.
like I think this version of the game which seems to be like vaguely Destiny inspired like is the way to do it, but it also is like pulling in like this is, I think it might fall off in the same way that like the Marvel kind of Destiny clone fell off, right? In that like he's like yeah, you can like switch out gear, but it's like kind of weird because it's like this Hulk just like wear a different set of pants, right? Like, it
Yeah, the
feels
Marvel's Avengers that was
yeah,
made by Square Enix, they just discontinued that.
yeah, or in the process of discontinuing it. Speaking of which, sad news: Rumbleverse is going offline at the end of the month.
Oh, I saw that. I'm so sorry. I saw that and
Yeah,
immediately my heart broke for you.
yeah. I mean, I haven't played in a while, so I'm part of the problem. I really
Uh,
enjoyed it. I like wish it because it stayed alive, but like you know, less than a year.
it's funny how much we as gamers sort of fought for dedicated servers for a lot of these games, and that ends up kind of being the thing that undoes a lot of them. If Rumbleverse were some sort of like, do you remember like peer-to-peer lobby game,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like Killing Floor is like this, right? Where people are manually setting up their own sort of servers. That like tanks the overhead on these games. Killing Floor has been around for forever, right? And I bet that the players on something like Killing Floor and the players on something like Rumbleverse are actually pretty similar, all things considered. But the structure of them are just, I don't know. It's tough to
yeah,
it's tough to put it all together.
yeah. It's one of those things for like it kind of wouldn't be fun if like it was a peer peer-to-peer thing, you got into like a bad match, right? Like, um, but yeah, no, it's a shame. It's a shame.
I'm sorry, bud.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to Street Fighter in June. That's like my next big. Do you have like anything big on your horizon?
Diablo 4
Huh?
ish. Like not really just in terms of it's gonna be a fun distraction is what I'm expecting, right?
Yeah, that's
It's
fair.
going to be kind of I don't know. It'll probably be coming around the WoW patch actually, and maybe it'll just get drowned out. Like that's kind of my current thing. I'm still pretty into Dragonflight. I like logging in and doing my profession weeklies. I have a million different characters. Like I am living the dream of being that guy. I've had a couple of people personally reach out to me to recraft their gear. And you want to know why? It's the funniest thing. I didn't even fucking think about this when we were talking about crafting orders. It's because it was made by me. And they look me up.
Yeah.
It says made by Baron. And so they send me the recrafting order. And I was like, well, this is the shit. I kind of completely forgot about it. And it's also been like, because I've been farming pretty hard on Baron, I'm probably one of the better blacksmiths on the server at this point. And I've been doing the same thing on, Baron and Tunrik are a little bit different. Tunrik is built for weapons. Baron is built for armor, obviously.
I think I sent you a
But
schematic I randomly found. I don't know if you or
I did, yeah, I got it. Thank you. I appreciate that. And it's like, so at this point I can do a lot of I can do a lot of stuff. I also have a third blacksmith, funnily enough, whose whole job is just to make the alloys. I just spec'd him entirely into make alloy good so that I could support kind of the other two. And that like ecosystem is just like fun to do and manage, and it's easy to watch Andor while I'm flying around and farming my mining for the week or whatever it is. That kind of a thing. But yeah, so and then the other one is Warhammer. Boy, I don't know what's going on. Total Warhammer 3. Creative Assembly, you're fucking it up. It has been 5 months since we've gotten any content ever from them. It's been a couple of bug fix patches, but like nothing like new. And apparently we're not getting anything until quarter 4. I'm sorry, quarter 2. And I was like, the fuck? We're going 6 months without anything, right? Like between September of 2022, and we're going to get into April, May, June, maybe, in order to get to the next DLC. This is crazy, especially because one of the things they talked about with Warhammer 3 was how successful the DLC for Warhammer 2 was. You want to know why that shit was successful? You put out a new DLC once every 3 months. Every quarter had a new DLC for me to go pick up and get back and invest it in your game. I have no reason to do that. And it sucks. I want to play Warhammer 3, but there's just like nothing new to do. And they talked about how they actually made 2 DLC teams. There's like Team A and Team B, and Team A works on one DLC while Team B works on another, and they have alternate sort of cycles, right? So the idea is that instead of having one team doing 3 months sort of release cycles, they have 2 teams doing 6-month release cycles. Yeah, exactly. And I was like, how I don't know. I guess any new structure like that is bound to be tough, and and they're probably like flubbing it on some level. But boy, are they flubbing it right now. I want to play Warhammer 3. This would be perfect. It would be perfect for the 1-year anniversary of Total War Warhammer 3 if we could get a big juicy Chaos Dwarves DLC or something kind of along those lines. But yeah, nowhere on the horizon. So I guess I'm waiting. I guess I'm waiting for that. The only other thing on my mind actually is the sequel to Jedi Survivor. The reason I mentioned it is because I was like, oh, that sequel's coming out in April. It was supposed to come out soon. Yeah, it got delayed to April actually.
Okay.
And I was like, I should do it. I should like commit to getting into Jedi Survivor. But for right now, we're playing Yoshi's Story, I guess. So there we are.
Yeah, I feel that. So the only other thing on my radar is Quantumania comes out in a couple weeks.
Oh,
which
true.
I'm very excited for. The new
Yeah.
Fast and Furious comes out in like May, right?
Yeah, F10. When did F10 come out? Oh my god, movie. Show me movie. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Yeah, May 2023. So
Yeah, No, we.
Yeah,
I have to get.
Shazam. The only other one
Oh,
that
right.
we're talking about is Shazam: Fury of the Gods.
When does that come
Is
out?
coming out soon. Shazam: Fury of the Gods coming out March 2017 or March 17th rather. So you know
Yeah.
that's cool. That's
How
nice.
how do you feel
Um,
about Henry not being Supes anymore?
Hate it. I hate it a
Me
lot. I
too.
think it's bad and dumb. I think Henry Cavill is amazing, and I think that they are idiots for not going for it. But you know what? I'm not going to be that bad because Jason Momoa is reportedly staying as Aquaman, which, to be fair, Aquaman made $1 billion. But also to be fair, Jason Momoa rocks, and he's so good, and I just want, Aquaman 2 to be amazing. I don't know. My current thing with the DCU is I'm willing to extend a lot of leeway. I think James Gunn's a real smart guy. I am very excited for DC properties to have sort of somebody at the head with the level of leadership that kind of like Kevin Feige had for Marvel, and them tapping sort of this accomplished director from the other side is like the perfect kind of thing for that. My understanding is that quite a lot has been sort of like tossed, but that they're also keeping around things that have been working. So for instance, the Batman sequel is its own thing, and they're more or less letting Matt Reeves do whatever he wants. I think that's perfect. And they're saying, you know, you don't have to make it. It's not part of the cinematic universe. Robert Pattinson is not going to be the Batman in whatever, right? He's just this guy. And I think that is maybe the thing that I find most intriguing about all of this is creating this extra space, calling it Elseworlds, is creating this extra space where people can do cool and interesting things with DC properties like Joker or the Batman, or they even mentioned Teen Titans Go along these sorts of lines. But then there is the main kind of DCU that is going to be kind of kicking into gear, and all that stuff is going to kind of be the rival to Marvel when it comes to this stuff. That I don't have any more complex thoughts about it. I think getting rid of Henry Cavill is dumb, but what are you gonna do?
Yeah. Yeah. I did see rumors that like they might keep Ezra Miller, which is wild, but like, I also don't know. So, we'll see.
I also don't know. I don't know about any of that.
But yeah, games wise, like I said, big ones for me are Street Fighter 6 and Diablo 4. You might want to check out Street Fighter 6. They've got like a new control scheme that's like, I think I told you about this. It's like melee style, or Smash Brothers
Oh yeah,
style.
yeah, 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 yeah. You mentioned that
Yeah,
the Smash Brothers thing. Yeah, that's interesting.
yeah, yeah. But I will definitely be playing that when that comes out because I do love me some Street Fighter. Um,
Oh yeah.
uh, uh, the comment that The Flash is the best superhero movie was weird as hell to me, given all the Ezra Miller insanity.
You know what? To be completely honest with you, I get that, but I am also willing to believe that the Flash is going to be sweet, um, just because uh, it actually has a pretty good team behind it, all things considered. Um,
Yeah,
Andy, what's it called? Is the guy who did the It movies. He's pretty talented. It's written by this pair of screenwriters who I liked a lot. Do you remember Game Night from a couple of years ago that I described as just like being one of the randomly
yeah,
funniest movies in a long time? It's written by those guys. They got Michael Keaton. Apparently Batfleck is back for some amount, some like real amount of the Flash. I don't know. There's cool stuff in there.
yeah. I mean, Ezra Miller might be a shitbag, right? Like,
Yeah,
so is Tom Cruise. He's a great fucking actor, right? Like, um,
true.
so I can separate the art from the artist there. Um, doesn't mean that I think that's maybe smart to keep him on. I did like the posts that were like Ezra Miller turning into the Reverse Flash before our eyes, right? Like that would be, it was me, Barry. But yeah. But yeah. We've gone over time. I kind of out of things to say, but you have anything else you want to talk about before we get out of here?
I have nothing else on my mind. It just seems like an odd franchise to be sticking to. Hasn't been released, hasn't been proven problematic. Star. Yeah, I definitely agree. Well, yeah. So the thing is that okay, the Henry Cavill stuff is a little more complicated than that because Henry Cavill apparently there's this power struggle in the studio where The Rock was trying to really muscle in with Black Adam and take over kind of control of like the DCU, and he ended up in this whole like kerfuffle. And Henry Cavill is sort of a casualty of that because he was part of the Rock's thing. This coup sort of failed, right? And so Henry Cavill gets ousted for that reason. That is my understanding. That is my understanding, to the best of my understanding. How kind of that stuff works, and you know why.
I had also heard, and maybe this is just like an unfounded rumor that I heard somewhere else, but like James Gunn was going to do a Black Superman, and that was part of it. And obviously, Cavill cannot be a Black Superman.
The Black Superman thing is real, but it's a completely different project. It's Black Superman is who's the Creed guy? Michael B. Jordan.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's from Newark, actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's funny because, like, you know, so Maplewood and Newark are right next to each other. He started shooting The Wire, basically. You know, and that's like his whole sort of origin story, but he really loves like anime and stuff like that. Like he loves Dragon Ball Z, he loves Naruto, and he's poured a bunch of money back into Newark, like right along Springfield Avenue, which is where Maplewood and Irvington and all that stuff is. Yeah.
Well, if he's a real nerd, he's, you know, well suited to be the next Superman then, right?
True.
Just like Henry.
True.
That's what we need. We need like Superman talk, and Henry and Michael B. Jordan talking nerd shit.
Yeah, I imagine that project is going to sit in the Elseworlds thing, just like the Robert Pattinson thing. You know what I mean? They're not going to worry too much about it.
All right. Well, with that, I'm going to say, if you want to tell us about any of the stuff we talked about in this podcast, you can email us at derpsgames@gmail.com or podcast@derpsgames.com. Follow us at twitch.tv/derpsgames or youtube.com/@somederpsgames, where these go out live. As you can see, we respond to the chat as I check to make sure no one has chatted us in YouTube, and they have not. So, you know, feel free to jump in and contribute. That's everything I have. Buddy, you have anything else you're looking to promote?
I have nothing else. Well, actually, I do have a small thing to promote. This week on the Yakupar Games Twitch channel, which is going to be at 10 a.m. Pacific, I'm going to be playing Zoetti for the first time. Zoetti is a game that has been in development for a long, long time. I've talked about it before on the cast. You know, you're using like poker hands in order to do like a roguelike deck builder sort of experience. It's very cool. I have had a ton of fun with it, and this is the first time that people are going to actually be able to see it in development. So there we go, a little announcement. That's what this stream is on Friday.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to say with that, until next time, loyal listeners.
Until next time, loyal listeners.